Grandma died last week, my daughter told the insurance agent. I heard it from the next room. I was lying in my bed, in the tiny room off the kitchen, where my daughter had put me 6 months ago, when I heard her say the words that stopped my heart. Yes, she passed away peacefully last Tuesday, in her sleep. We're still processing the loss. I held my breath. She was talking about me, and I was very much alive. The morning it happened started like any other. I woke before dawn, the way I have for 50 years. Old habits die hard when you've spent half a century running a farm. My body doesn't know how to sleep past 5, even though there's no livestock to feed anymore, no fields to walk, no equipment to check. Just this small room with its single window facing the backyard, the room my daughter Karen moved me into 6 months ago with that sweet smile of hers. It'll be easier for you, Mom, she'd said, helping me carry my things from the upstairs bedroom I'd shared with Harold for 43 years. You'll be closer to the kitchen, closer to the food. No more stairs to worry about. What she didn't say was that this room was also farther from the front door, farther from the living room where guests might see me, farther from any chance I might embarrass her by existing too visibly in her suburban home. I'd sold the farm 8 months ago. Karen handled everything, said it was too much for me to manage after Harold passed. 300 acres of Iowa farmland, the legacy my husband and I built together from nothing, gone in a single transaction. The money went into accounts Karen managed for my protection. I'd never seen a statement. That morning, I lay in my narrow bed, listening to the house wake up around me. Karen's footsteps in the hallway, her husband Dale's deeper tread, the coffee maker gurgling in the kitchen just beyond my wall, the muffled sound of voices I didn't recognize, a man's voice, professional, polite, using words like documentation and beneficiary and claim process. I pushed myself up slowly, my joints protesting the way they always did in the early hours. The wall between my room and the kitchen was thin, contractor-grade drywall that did nothing to muffle sound. Harold would have called it shoddy work and fixed it himself. But Harold was gone, and I was here, and someone was talking about death in my daughter's living room. I pressed my ear against the wall. The policy is quite substantial, the man was saying. $400,000. Your mother was very well insured. She was, Karen's voice replied, calm, controlled, the voice of a woman conducting business. My father was always careful about these things. He wanted to make sure we'd be taken care of. And the death certificate, I'll need that for the claim. We have it right here. That was Dale. Papers rustling. Everything's in order. My hand went to my chest. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Death certificate. They had a death certificate with my name on it. When did she pass? The insurance agent asked. Last Tuesday, Karen said, peacefully, in her sleep. She'd been declining for some time, you know. Dementia. She didn't always know where she was or who we were. In a way, it was a blessing. Dementia. That was the lie Karen had been telling everyone for the past year. The lie that explained why I never answered the phone when old friends called, why I never attended church anymore, why I sat quietly in my back room while Karen's dinner parties went on without me. I didn't have dementia. I had a daughter who wanted me invisible. And the funeral arrangements? The agent asked. We've scheduled cremation for Thursday, Dale said. We don't want to drag this out. Mom wouldn't have wanted a big fuss. Cremation. Thursday, 5 days away. They were going to cremate me, claim the insurance money, and no one would ever know. My hand moved without conscious thought, sliding under my pillow to the small device I kept there. Harold's Sony dictaphone, purchased in 1983, still working perfectly because Harold maintained everything he owned with religious devotion. He'd taught me to use it years ago, sitting at the kitchen table in our farmhouse, showing me how to press the buttons. "You never know when you'll need proof, Edie," he'd said, his weathered hands guiding mine. "This world runs on paper and recordings. A man's word isn't worth a hill of beans anymore, but a recording. That's evidence. That's protection." I thought he was being paranoid. Harold was always a little paranoid, especially about money, especially after what happened to his father. But I'd kept the dictaphone anyway, carried it with me when I moved to Karen's house, tucked it under my pillow out of habit. Now, my fingers found the familiar buttons in the darkness. I pressed record. Through the wall, the conversation continued. "Now, about the payout process," the agent said. "Once we verify the death certificate and process the claim, the funds should be available within 2 to 3 weeks. "That quickly?" Karen's voice brightened. "That's wonderful. We've had some expenses, the funeral, and Mom's medical bills." I had no medical bills. I took no medications except the vitamins I bought myself at the pharmacy. I was 79 years old and healthier than most people half my age. 50 years of farm work had given me a constitution that city doctors marveled at. "Of course," the agent said. "These situations are always difficult. Is there anything else you need from me today?" "Actually," Dale said, and I heard the chair creak as he shifted his weight. "There's one thing, the beneficiary. It's listed as Karen Miller, correct? As the sole surviving family member?" A pause, papers shuffling. "Let me check the policy documents," the agent said. Mrs. Morrison's husband was quite thorough with the paperwork when he set this up. I smiled in the darkness of my room. Harold, even from the grave, Harold was still protecting me. "Is there a problem?" Karen's voice had an edge now. No problem. I just want to make sure everything is in order before we proceed. These older policies sometimes have complications." I heard the agent gathering his papers, making his excuses, promising to be in touch. The front door opened and closed, and then Karen's voice, stripped of its professional veneer, sharp and frustrated. What the hell was that about? "Complications? What complications?" "Relax," Dale said. "It's probably nothing. Standard procedure. We'll have the money in 3 weeks. We need that money, Dale. You know what happens if we don't pay Morrison by the end of the month." "I know. Believe me, I know. But the old woman is dead. The certificate is filed. The cremation is scheduled. What could go wrong?" Nothing could go wrong. That's what they believed. They had planned everything perfectly, covered every angle, anticipated every obstacle. They had forged documents and bribed a doctor and convinced the world that Edith Morrison had dementia and couldn't be trusted to speak for herself. But they'd forgotten one thing. They'd forgotten that the old woman in the back room was still alive, still listening, still recording every word. And they'd forgotten that her husband, paranoid Harold Morrison, had never trusted anyone completely, not even his own daughter. The insurance policy they were so eager to claim, the $400,000 they'd already spent in their minds. The beneficiary wasn't Karen. It was the Riverside Community Church Building Fund. I stopped the recording and lay back on my pillow, staring at the ceiling. Thursday. They were going to cremate me on Thursday. I had 5 days to figure out what to do, 5 days to stop my own murder. The absurdity of it struck me then, lying there in the darkness. My own daughter, the child I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, comforted through nightmares. She was planning to erase me from existence for an insurance payout. Not kill me outright, not in the messy, obvious way that would leave evidence. No, she was cleverer than that. She was going to make me legally dead while keeping me physically alive, tucked away somewhere no one would think to look. It was almost elegant in a horrifying way. A victimless crime, at least on paper. The insurance company would pay out. Karen would collect. And the real Edith Morrison would simply cease to exist, replaced by some confused old woman in a nursing home who answered to a different name and couldn't remember her own children. I wondered how long she'd been planning this. Months? Years? Had she looked at me across the Thanksgiving table and calculated my remaining lifespan? Had she smiled at me on my birthday while mentally spending the policy payout? The thought made me sick to my stomach, but it also made me angry. And anger, I was discovering, was useful. Anger was fuel. Harold had been angry too, in his way. Not the explosive, shouting kind of anger that burned itself out in minutes. His anger was the cold, patient kind, the kind that made plans and kept records and waited for exactly the right moment to strike. I'd always thought I was the softer one in our marriage, the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromises. But lying there in the dark, listening to my heartbeat, slow from panic to determination, I realized that wasn't true. I was soft when softness was called for. I was steel when steel was required. Karen had never seen my steel. She'd never had reason to. I'd sheltered her from every hardship, solved every problem, given her everything she asked for, and most of what she didn't. That had been my mistake. I'd raised her to believe that the world owed her comfort, that other people existed to serve her needs. I'd created the monster that was now trying to devour me. Well, time to uncreate it. I need you to understand something before I continue. The woman lying in that bed, listening to her daughter plan her death, wasn't the same woman who'd raised Karen 38 years ago. That woman had been softer, more trusting, more willing to believe the best in people. That woman had ignored warning signs and made excuses and told herself that blood meant something. The woman in that bed had 50 years of running a farm behind her, 50 years of negotiating with men who thought a woman couldn't possibly understand business, 50 years of catching lies and spotting cheats and protecting what was hers. Harold used to say, I had a mind like a steel trap. You let people think you're just a farm wife, he'd tell me, shaking his head with admiration. But I've seen you catch more thieves than any accountant in the county. He was right. I'd caught them all over the years. The feed supplier who'd been shorting our orders by 10%. The equipment dealer who'd sold us a tractor with a hidden lien. The accountant who'd embezzled $30,000 over 5 years, thinking I'd never notice a $47 discrepancy in the ledgers. I noticed everything. I always had. And I'd noticed Karen changing too. I just hadn't wanted to see it. It started 3 years ago, maybe 4. Little questions about the estate. Casual inquiries about Harold's insurance policies. Suggestions that I add her name to the farm deed for tax purposes. At the time, I'd told myself she was just being practical, thinking ahead, helping me plan. Then Harold died, heart attack, quick and merciful. One moment he was checking the fence line in the north pasture. The next he was gone. I found him lying in the tall grass, peaceful, like he'd just decided to take a nap under the autumn sky. After the funeral, Karen's questions became more insistent, more specific, more urgent. "You can't run this place alone, Mom. You need to sell. Let me handle it. These accounts need to be consolidated. It's too confusing, having money in so many different places. You should move in with us. The farm is too isolated. What if something happened to you?" I resisted at first. The farm was my home, the land Harold and I had worked together, the legacy we'd built for our children. But Karen was persistent, and I was grieving, and eventually I gave in. The farm sold for $1.2 million. I never saw a penny of it. Karen put it all into accounts I didn't have access to for protection. Then she moved me into the back room. Then she started telling people I had dementia. Then she stopped letting me answer the phone or go to church or see anyone who might realize I was perfectly fine. I should have fought back sooner. I should have seen what was happening and put my foot down. But she was my daughter, my only living child since Michael died in Vietnam, and I wanted so badly to believe she loved me. I was a fool, an old fool who let sentiment cloud her judgment. But that morning, lying in my narrow bed with the dictaphone clutched in my hand, I stopped being a fool. I became what Harold had always known I was, dangerous. The house was empty by 9. Karen worked at a real estate office downtown. Dale had some kind of consulting business that seemed to involve a lot of meetings and very little actual income. They left together, the way they always did, locking the front door behind them like I was a dog they didn't trust not to run away. They didn't know about the spare key I'd hidden in the flower pot on my windowsill. They didn't know about a lot of things. I dressed slowly, my arthritic fingers fumbling with buttons and zippers. My body wasn't what it used to be, but my mind was sharp as ever. I had work to do. First, Dale's office. The small room at the back of the house where he kept his business documents. The lock on the door was a joke, a simple button lock that opened with a butter knife. The desk drawers were full of papers, bills mostly, past due notices with red stamps screaming, final warning and collection pending, credit card statements showing balances that made my stomach turn, a second mortgage on the house I hadn't known existed. Karen and Dale were drowning in debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars spread across dozens of accounts, all of them screaming for payment. In the bottom drawer, I found what I was looking for, a death certificate. Official looking, complete with seals and signatures. Edith Morrison, deceased. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Date of death, 6 days ago. The doctor who'd signed it was listed as Dr. Raymond Price. I didn't know the name, but I recognized the address. A strip mall clinic on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that handed out prescriptions without asking too many questions. I photographed the document with the old flip phone Karen didn't know I had. Then I kept searching. In Karen's nightstand, hidden under a stack of magazines, I found the crematorium receipt, prepaid services, Peaceful Passages Cremation Center, $2,800, scheduled for Thursday, 10 a.m., no viewing, no service, no chance for anyone to see that the casket was empty. In the filing cabinet in the basement, I found the insurance policy itself, the one Karen was so eager to claim. She'd highlighted the payout amount in yellow marker, circled it twice. She hadn't read page 4. Page 4 listed the beneficiary, not Karen Miller, not any member of the Morrison family. The Riverside Community Church Building Fund. Harold had set it up that way in 1995, right after our son Michael's remains were finally returned from Vietnam. The church that had married us, baptized our children, buried our son. Harold wanted to make sure it would always be there, always be funded, no matter what happened. He never told Karen. He never told anyone except me, and I had forgotten about it until this moment. I sat on the cold basement floor, holding that policy, and I laughed. The sound echoed off the concrete walls, strange and hollow. Karen thought she was stealing $400,000. She was stealing nothing. She was committing fraud and forgery and conspiracy, risking prison, destroying her soul, and at the end of it, she would have nothing. Harold, you magnificent, paranoid old fool. Even from beyond the grave, you saw this coming. You planned for this moment 30 years before it happened. I remembered the day he'd set up that policy. We'd argued about it, actually. I'd wanted Karen listed as the beneficiary, the way you'd expect. Harold had shaken his head, that stubborn set to his jaw that meant his mind was made up. She doesn't need it, he'd said. She'll have the farm, the savings, everything else we leave behind. This policy is different. This is security, and I don't want it going to someone who might squander it. She's our daughter, Harold. She's not going to squander anything. He'd looked at me then, with those eyes that saw everything, that missed nothing. Maybe not, but people change, Edie. Circumstances change. I've seen too many families torn apart by money to take that risk. I'd thought he was being unfair. I'd thought he was letting his father's bankruptcy poison his view of human nature. I'd been wrong. He'd been right. And now that policy, that stubborn act of protection I'd argued against, was the only thing standing between me and complete helplessness. But I couldn't just wait for her to fail. The cremation was in 5 days. They were planning to make me disappear. Even if the insurance claim fell through, I would still be gone, hidden in some nursing home under a fake name, or worse. I needed help. I climbed the basement stairs slowly, my knees aching. In the kitchen, I found the church directory Karen had thrown away months ago. I'd rescued it from the trash, hidden it in the back of my closet. Now I flipped through the pages until I found the number I needed. Pastor Michael Chen. Not Michael Chen the lawyer, but Michael Chen, who had taken over Riverside Community Church after Pastor Williams retired. A younger man, 68, but sharp as a tack. Harold had liked him. Said he was one of the few honest men left in the county. My hands shook as I dialed. Riverside Community Church. Pastor Chen speaking. Pastor, this is Edith Morrison, Harold Morrison's wife. A pause, then warmly, Mrs. Morrison, it's been so long. We've missed you at services. Your daughter said you weren't well. My daughter has been saying a lot of things, Pastor. Most of them aren't true. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear him thinking. Mrs. Morrison, Harold called me before he passed. Did you know that? I hadn't known. What did he say? He said you'd call when you needed help. He said to look after you if anything happened. He gave me the name of a lawyer, someone who handles complicated situations. I closed my eyes. Harold, even from beyond the grave, still protecting me. I need that name, Pastor. I need it today. By noon, I was sitting in the office of Thomas Chen. no relation to Pastor Chen, despite the shared surname. Thomas was a lawyer who specialized in elder fraud cases. His office was small, but meticulously organized, and his eyes were kind but sharp. The walls were covered with framed newspaper clippings and photographs. I recognized some of them. Cases that had made the local news, elderly victims who had been rescued from scheming relatives and predatory caretakers. Thomas Chen had built his career on protecting people like me. Mrs. Morrison, he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip, Pastor Chen spoke very highly of your husband. Said Harold was one of the most methodical men he'd ever met. That's one word for it, I said. Paranoid was another. Thomas smiled. In my experience, there's often a fine line between the two. Please, sit down. Tell me everything. I told him everything. The recording, the forged death certificate, the cremation receipt, the insurance policy, and its real beneficiary. I told him about the move to the back room, the fake dementia diagnosis, the year of isolation and gaslighting. Thomas listened without interruption, making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Mrs. Morrison, I've been doing this work for 23 years. I've seen children steal from their parents, siblings defraud each other, caregivers empty bank accounts. But I have to tell you, this is one of the most comprehensive schemes I've encountered. Comprehensive, I repeated. They've covered almost every angle. The death certificate, the cremation to eliminate evidence, the nursing home admission to make you disappear. They've clearly been planning this for months, maybe longer. Does that mean they'll get away with it? No. Thomas's voice was firm. It means they've created more evidence against themselves. Every forged document, every paid receipt, every step in this scheme is another felony charge waiting to happen. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. Mrs. Morrison, you understand that what your daughter is planning constitutes multiple felonies: insurance fraud, forgery, identity theft, conspiracy. If this goes forward, she's looking at serious prison time. I understand. And you're willing to press charges against your own daughter. I thought about Karen as a little girl, running through the cornfields with Michael, their laughter carrying on the summer wind. I thought about her at her wedding, beautiful in white, full of hope. I thought about the day she was born, the moment I first held her in my arms, the overwhelming love that had flooded through me. Then I thought about her voice through the wall. She passed away peacefully last Tuesday. My daughter is planning to have me cremated while I'm still alive, I said quietly. She's already stolen everything I have. She's told everyone I have dementia, so no one will believe me if I speak up. So yes, Mr. Chen, I'm willing. Thomas nodded slowly. Then let's talk about what happens next. He returned to his desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. First, we need to secure that recording. Do you have it with you? I pulled the dictaphone from my purse and handed it to him. His eyebrows rose slightly when he saw it. This is a Sony TCM 150. They stopped making these in the 90s. My husband bought it in 1983. He was very particular about his equipment. Does it still work? Better than most things made today. Harold always said the old ways were the best ways. Thomas pressed play. My daughter's voice filled the office. Yes, she passed away peacefully last Tuesday, in her sleep. He stopped the recording and looked at me with something like admiration. Mrs. Morrison, your husband may have just saved your life from beyond the grave. That sounds exactly like something Harold would do. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was lying about you, planning against you, treating your very existence as an obstacle to be removed? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. The next 4 days were a blur of careful planning and quiet preparation. Thomas contacted the district attorney's office. The recording I'd made was admissible evidence under Iowa's single-party consent law. Combined with the forged death certificate, the cremation receipt, and the insurance policy, we had enough for criminal charges. But Thomas wanted more. He wanted to catch Karen and Dale in the act of filing the claim. He wanted the case to be so airtight that no jury could possibly acquit. Insurance fraud is taken very seriously, he explained. If we can document the actual filing of a fraudulent claim, we add federal charges to the mix. FBI involvement. Your daughter won't just face state prison. She'll face federal time. I didn't flinch. What do we need to do? Pastor Chen contacted the insurance company directly. As the actual beneficiary of the policy, Riverside Community Church had standing to request information about claims. The company's fraud investigation unit was very interested in what we had to tell them. They agreed to let Karen file her claim. They would process it normally, ask the standard questions, and let her believe everything was proceeding smoothly. And then, at the right moment, they would reveal the truth. The trap was set. All we had to do was wait. But Karen wasn't patient. By Wednesday morning, she was getting nervous. I could hear her pacing in the living room, arguing with Dale in hushed voices. The insurance agent keeps calling, she said. He wants more documentation. He's asking questions about the beneficiary. Just give him what he wants, Dale replied. The death certificate is solid. Raymond guaranteed it would hold up to scrutiny. But what if someone at the church notices? What if they ask questions about why Mom isn't at her own funeral? There is no funeral, remember? Just cremation. Quick and clean. By the time anyone realizes something is wrong, we'll have the money and be long gone. Long gone. They were planning to run. Take the money and disappear, probably to some country without extradition treaties. Leave me behind in whatever hole they dug for me. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling my heart pound. Tomorrow was Thursday. Tomorrow was the cremation. Tomorrow was the day everything would change. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my narrow bed, listening to the house settle around me, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I thought about Harold, gone now 2 years, who had seen something in Karen that I'd refused to see. He'd never trusted her completely, never added her name to the insurance policy, never told her about the church beneficiary. He knew. I thought about Michael, my firstborn, dead at 21 in a jungle on the other side of the world. Karen had always been jealous of him, always felt she was second best, always resented the shrine we'd built to his memory. I thought about the farm, 300 acres of good Iowa soil, the work of 2 lifetimes, gone now, sold for money I'd never see, to people I'd never meet. And I thought about myself, 79 years old, alone, hiding in a back room of my daughter's house, waiting to be disappeared. Number, not waiting, planning, preparing, getting ready to fight. Harold used to say that a woman who keeps good records can survive anything. He was right. I had records. I had evidence. I had allies. And tomorrow I would have justice. The morning came gray and cold, typical November in Iowa. Karen knocked on my door at 7, her voice bright and artificial. Mom, you're going to stay with a friend today, just while we handle some business. I sat up slowly, playing the part she expected, confused, compliant, barely aware of what was happening. A friend? What friend? Just someone who's going to take care of you for a while. Get dressed, okay? Get dressed, okay? We need to leave soon. The friend was a nursing home 2 hours away, in a town where no one knew me. Thomas's investigator had discovered the paperwork. I was to be admitted under a different name, diagnosed with advanced dementia, kept sedated and silent. By the time anyone thought to look for Edith Morrison would have been cremated and forgotten. I took my time getting dressed. Every button was an exercise in patience. Every zipper a test of my nerves. Through my window, I watched a sedan pull into the driveway. It was silver, anonymous, the kind of car that wouldn't attract attention on any highway in America. A man climbed out, middle-aged, soft around the middle, wearing a white coat that didn't quite fit. He looked like someone playing a doctor in a community theater production, close enough to be convincing from a distance, but wrong up close. Dr. Raymond Price, the man who had signed my death certificate while I was still breathing. I heard the front door open, heard voices in the hallway, Karen's bright artificial welcome, Dale's deeper murmur. The doctor's voice, smooth and professional, practiced at saying nothing that could later be used against him. Then my door swung wide, and Karen stood there with her bright, false smile. "Mom, this is Dr. Reynolds. He's going to do a quick checkup before we go." Reynolds, not Price, of course. Different name for different occasions. I wondered how many identities this man carried, how many times he'd signed his name to lies. The doctor entered my room, his eyes scanning the space like a predator assessing prey. He had the look of a man who'd done this before, who knew exactly how to handle inconvenient old women who asked too many questions. "Mrs. Morrison," he said smoothly, "I just need to check your vitals, make sure you're fit for travel." I looked at him, looked at Karen hovering in the doorway, looked at Dale behind her, car keys already in his hand. 50 years of running a farm had taught me one thing above all others. There comes a moment when you stop waiting and start acting, when you stop playing defense and go on the attack, when you show the people who've been underestimating you exactly what you're made of. This was that moment. "I heard you," I said. The doctor froze. "I'm sorry?" The other night, in the living room, talking about my death certificate. The color drained from his face like water from a sink. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. In that moment, he looked nothing like a doctor. He looked like what he was, a small man caught in a big lie. Karen pushed forward, her voice sharp with panic. "Mom, you're confused. You had a dream. Doctor. Reynolds is here to help you." "I'm not confused." I reached under my pillow and pulled out the dictaphone. "And I have proof." Karen's eyes went wide. I watched the recognition dawn. The old tape recorder, the one Harold had always kept in his office, the one she'd thought was thrown away years ago. "What is that? What do you have?" "A recording of everything you said. You and Dale and the insurance agent passed away peacefully last Tuesday. Cremation on Thursday. Don't want to drag this out." The room went silent. I watched Karen's face cycle through emotions: shock, fear, calculation, rage. Each expression flickered across her features like slides in a projector, too fast to hide. "Give me that." She stepped toward me, hand outstretched. "Mom, give me that right now." "No." The word hung in the air between us, such a small word. Such a powerful one. I hadn't said no to Karen in years. maybe decades. Dale appeared in the doorway. His eyes took in the scene, me holding the recorder, Karen reaching for it, the doctor backing toward the wall. What's going on? Karen? She has a recording. She's been listening to us. Dale's face hardened. I saw something shift behind his eyes, something cold and calculating. This was the real Dale, I realized. Not the affable son-in-law who'd charmed us at family dinners, but the desperate man beneath the mask. Karen, we need to talk. Now. They stepped into the hallway. The doctor followed, practically running. I heard urgent whispers, fragments of conversation. Do this today, before she talks to anyone. Can't let her contact anyone. Just get her in the car. I picked up my phone and dialed Thomas Chen's number. He answered on the first ring. They're accelerating, I said quietly. It's happening now. I'm calling the police. Don't go anywhere with them. I may not have a choice. Mrs. Morrison, whatever happens, remember, the trap is set. All you have to do is walk them into it. I hung up just as the bedroom door flew open. Dale stood there, keys in hand, his face a mask of forced calm. Get your coat, Edith. We're taking a drive. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just stood slowly, put on my coat, and followed him to the car. Karen was already in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. The doctor had disappeared, probably running for his life. As Dale backed out of the driveway, I saw a black sedan parked down the street. Thomas had told me about it, an investigator, keeping watch. I was not alone, but I wasn't safe yet either. The drive took 30 minutes. I sat in the back seat, watching the familiar streets of my hometown slide past, wondering if this would be the last time I ever saw them. Karen and Dale didn't speak. The tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Dale pulled into a parking lot. I looked up at the building, Midwest Mutual Insurance, corporate offices, the place where Karen planned to file her fraudulent claim. What are we doing here? I asked, keeping my voice confused and uncertain. Just some paperwork, Mom. Karen turned in her seat, her smile back in place. We need you to sign a few things. They were going to have me sign documents that proved I was alive, then claim I died immediately after. Witnesses to my signature, followed by witnesses to my death. It was clever, in a sick way. They had no idea what was waiting inside. The lobby was elegant, all marble floors and leather chairs and soft classical music. A receptionist sat behind a curved desk, smiling professionally. Karen approached, her voice steady. We're here to file a claim. My mother, Edith Morrison, passed away last week. I'm so sorry for your loss. The receptionist's smile didn't waver. Please have a seat. Mr. Brennan will be right with you. We sat in the waiting area, Dale on one side of me, Karen on the other. I noticed two men in suits sitting across the room, pretending to read magazines. Their eyes never left us. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Every second felt like an eternity. I could feel Karen's tension radiating from her body, like heat from a stove. Her leg bounced continuously. Her fingers drummed on her purse. Stop fidgeting, Dale muttered. I can't help it. This is taking too long. It's been 5 minutes. 5 minutes too long. I said nothing. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, looking like exactly what they thought I was. A confused old woman who didn't understand what was happening around her. But inside, I was counting the people in the lobby, counting the security cameras, counting the exits. 50 years of running a farm had taught me to assess my surroundings automatically, to know my options without having to think about them. The receptionist glanced at us, then quickly looked away. She knows, I thought. She's part of this. The whole office is waiting for the right moment. A door opened. Mr. Brennan emerged, the same agent I'd heard through my wall. He looked older than I'd imagined, grayer, more tired, like a man who'd seen too much of human nature's ugly side. Behind him, two more figures appeared, Thomas Chen and Pastor Michael. Karen saw them and froze. Her whole body went rigid, like a deer caught in headlights. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Brennan said calmly, "Before we process this claim, I need to clarify something about the beneficiary." "What about it?" Karen's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath, the first cracks in her composure. "The beneficiary of this policy is not you. It's the Riverside Community Church Building Fund. Your father designated it in 1995. Karen's face went white, then red, then white again. "That's impossible. That's a mistake." Pastor Michael stepped forward. His voice was gentle but firm, the voice of a man who had delivered difficult truths to grieving families for 40 years. "It's not a mistake. Harold Morrison was one of our most dedicated members. He wanted to ensure the church that married him, baptized his children, and buried his son would continue serving the community. He never changed that designation." But she's dead," Karen stammered. "The money has to go somewhere." "I'm not dead," I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For a moment, she looked like a fish gasping on a dock. "What?" "I said I'm not dead. I'm sitting right here. I've been sitting right here the whole time." That's not..." She turned to Dale, desperate. "Tell them. Show them the death certificate." "About that death certificate," Thomas Chen said, stepping forward. His voice had the calm, measured quality of a lawyer about to deliver devastating news. "We've had it examined by forensic document specialists. It's a forgery, as is the doctor's signature, as is the filing with the county clerk's office." Karen's face crumbled. Dale tried to rise from his chair, but one of the suited men was suddenly beside him, a firm hand on his shoulder. "Stay seated, sir." "What is this?" Dale demanded. "What's going on?" Mr. Brennan continued calmly. "Mrs. Miller, we've been in contact with the district attorney's office. We're aware of the fraudulent death certificate, the prepaid cremation, and the intent to file a false insurance claim. We have recordings of you discussing this plan with your husband." Karen turned to me, rage breaking through her composed facade. "You did this. You planned this." "I protected myself," I said, "the way Harold taught me." The lobby doors opened. 2 uniformed police officers entered, followed by a woman in a dark suit who identified herself as Detective Sarah Walsh. Behind them, 2 more officers, and behind them, a news camera. Thomas had called the local station. He'd wanted witnesses. He'd wanted the whole world to see what Karen and Dale had done. "Karen Miller, Dale Miller, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft." What happened next was chaos. Karen screaming, Dale trying to run and being tackled by one of the suited men, handcuffs clicking, rights being read. Through it all, I sat perfectly still in my leather chair, watching my daughter be led away in handcuffs. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have felt relief, grief, vindication? Tell me in the comments. Detective Walsh approached me after they'd taken Karen and Dale away. Her eyes were kind, but professional. Mrs. Morrison, we're going to need you to come down to the station. We have some questions, and we'll need your statement. Of course. She hesitated. There's something else. During our investigation, we discovered that approximately $127,000 from the sale of your farm is unaccounted for. We've traced it to accounts controlled by your daughter. I hadn't known about this. The farm sale money I'd thought went to expenses, the money I'd trusted Karen to manage for me. Stolen. All of it. Can you get it back? We're going to try. With these additional charges, your daughter is looking at significant prison time. A plea deal might include restitution. I nodded slowly. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It never had been. It was about trust, about the betrayal that cut deeper than any financial loss ever could. Pastor Michael drove me home that afternoon. The house was empty now. Crime scene tape across the front door. Investigators still working inside. You can't stay here, he said gently. Do you have somewhere to go? I looked at the house where I'd spent the last months of my captivity. The tiny room off the kitchen, the locked doors, the lies. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. The church has a small cottage near the community center. It's been empty since Mrs. Williams passed. Nothing fancy, but it's yours if you want it. I turned to look at him. The church? But I haven't been to services in over a year. Mrs. Morrison. His smile was warm. Harold Morrison donated enough to that church over the years to build a whole wing. You think a little thing like missing services matters to us, your family. Family. The word hit me harder than I expected. My daughter had tried to kill me for money, and here was a man I barely knew offering me a home because my husband had been a good man. Thank you, Pastor. I'd like that very much. The cottage was small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook, a porch that looked out over a garden that needed tending. Within a week, I'd moved in what few possessions Karen hadn't thrown away or sold. The first night, I sat on that porch as the sun set, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. I thought about Harold, about the life we'd built together, about the children we'd raised and lost, and the one who'd tried to destroy me. I thought about the farm, gone now to strangers who would never know its history. I thought about the years ahead, however many I had left, and I made a decision. 3 months later, Karen's case went to trial. She'd refused a plea deal, convinced she could talk her way out of it the way she'd talked her way out of everything her whole life. She couldn't. The courtroom was packed every day. People came from all over the county to watch, to witness, to understand. The local newspaper ran front-page stories about the case. The story of the mother who survived her own death had captured something in the public imagination. The prosecution presented their evidence methodically, piece by piece. The recording I'd made, played for the jury in my daughter's own voice. The forged death certificate, examined by handwriting experts who confirmed the signature was a fabrication. The cremation receipt, prepaid and scheduled. The nursing home paperwork, where I was to be admitted under a fake name and kept sedated indefinitely. They called Dr. Raymond Price to the stand. He'd flipped immediately after his arrest, trading his testimony for a reduced sentence. He told the jury about the arrangement with Dale, the money he'd been paid, the other documents he'd forged over the years. "How many times have you done this?" the prosecutor asked. "This was the first time with a death certificate," Price admitted, not meeting anyone's eyes. "But I've signed off on other things, disability claims, medical exemptions, whatever they paid me for." "And how much did they pay you for Mrs. Morrison's death certificate?" $5,000. $5,000. That's what my life was worth to them. Less than a used car. Less than a month's rent in the city. The defense tried everything. Karen's lawyer argued that she'd been under financial pressure, that Dale had manipulated her, that she'd never intended any real harm. He painted a picture of a desperate woman making bad choices, not a calculating predator executing a carefully planned scheme. The jury didn't buy it. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording I'd made, the forged death certificate, the cremation receipt, the prepaid nursing home admission, the testimony of Dr. Price, who'd flipped immediately to save himself, the bank records showing where the money had gone. Most damning of all was the testimony from Dale's previous scheme. It turned out this wasn't their first attempt. Years earlier, they'd done something similar to Dale's elderly aunt, draining her accounts and moving her to a facility where she died alone and forgotten. The prosecution introduced it as evidence of a pattern. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Karen stood in the courtroom, her face pale, her hands clenched. When the judge pronounced the sentence, 15 years, with the possibility of parole after 10, she finally looked at me. I don't know what she expected to see. Triumph, maybe. Satisfaction. The gloating of a mother who'd won. What she saw was grief, pure, overwhelming grief for the daughter I'd lost long before she ever planned to kill me. "Mrs. Morrison," the judge said, "do you have anything you'd like to say?" I stood slowly, my joints protesting the way they always did. The courtroom was silent. "I raised Karen with all the love I had," I said. "I gave her everything I could give. And when my husband died, I trusted her to take care of me, the way I'd always taken care of her." I paused, looking at my daughter, really looking at her for the first time in years. I don't know when I lost her. Maybe it was gradual, so slow I didn't notice. Maybe she was never really mine to lose. But the woman who planned to have me cremated while I was still alive, that woman is not my daughter. My daughter died a long time ago. I've been grieving her for years. I just didn't know it. I sat down. The courtroom remained silent. Later, in the parking lot, Thomas Chen found me standing by his car, staring at nothing. "How are you feeling?" I considered the question. "Old," I said finally. "Very old and very tired." "You did the right thing, Mrs. Morrison." "Did I?" I looked up at the courthouse, at the windows where my daughter was probably being processed for transfer to prison. I sent my own child to jail. I destroyed what was left of my family. I'll die alone. "You'll die free," Thomas said quietly. "You'll die on your own terms, not in some nursing home under a fake name, sedated into silence." He was right. I knew he was right. But it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. The months that followed were quiet ones. I settled into my cottage near the church, learned the rhythms of my new life. I tended the garden, grew tomatoes and peppers and herbs the way I had on the farm. I attended services on Sundays, reconnected with old friends who were horrified to learn what Karen had done. Some of those friends apologized. They'd believe Karen when she said I had dementia. They'd stayed away because they thought I wouldn't recognize them, wouldn't want to see them. I should have visited anyway, Martha Henderson told me, tears in her eyes. I should have seen for myself. She was convincing, I said. She convinced me too, for a long time. Others were less kind. They whispered behind my back, wondered what I'd done to drive my daughter to such desperate measures. Surely a mother must bear some responsibility, they seemed to think. Surely I'd failed Karen in some way that explained her crimes. Let them whisper. I knew the truth. I'd done nothing to deserve what Karen tried to do to me. Some people are simply broken, twisted by greed or resentment or whatever darkness lives in the human heart. You can love them with everything you have, and it won't be enough to save them. Harold understood that. He'd grown up watching his father trust the wrong people, lose everything to schemes and cons. That's why he was so careful. That's why he kept records of everything, trusted no one completely, built safeguards into every important decision. I used to think he was paranoid. Now I knew better. He was prepared. There's a difference. I received letters from Karen, not apologies, never apologies, justifications, explanations, attempts to make me understand why she'd done what she'd done. We were desperate, Mom. You don't understand the pressure we were under. You had so much and we had nothing. Dale's business failed, and the creditors were threatening us. We didn't know what else to do. You always favored Michael. Even after he died, it was always about Michael. I was never good enough for you. I read every letter. I kept them in a box in my closet, but I didn't respond. Some wounds don't heal with words. Some relationships can't be rebuilt through explanation and justification. Maybe someday I'll write back. Maybe someday I'll find the words to tell her what her betrayal cost me. Not just the money, not just the fear, but the loss of the daughter I thought I'd raised. The daughter who existed only in my imagination. But today is not that day. But there was one letter I did answer. It came from Oregon, from a woman named Lily Miller, Karen's daughter, my granddaughter. I hadn't seen her in 5 years, not since she'd cut ties with her parents over what she called boundary issues. Now I understood what those boundary issues really were. Grandma, she wrote, I'm so sorry. I should have visited. I should have checked on you. Mom told me you had dementia, and I believed her because it was easier than asking questions. I should have known better. I called her that night. She cried. I cried. We talked for 3 hours. Lily told me things I'd never known. How Karen had always been controlling, always demanding, always making Lily feel like she was never quite good enough. How Dale had been worse, manipulative, in ways Lily hadn't understood until she was old enough to recognize the patterns. I stopped talking to them 5 years ago, Lily said. Everyone said I was being dramatic, that I needed to forgive and forget, but I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. You protected yourself, I said. That takes courage. I learned it from you, Grandma. Mom always talked about how stubborn you were, how you never let anyone push you around. She meant it as a criticism. I thought it was a compliment. I smiled at that. Stubborn. Yes, I suppose I was. Am. She used to tell me stories about you, Lily continued. About how you ran the farm when Grandpa was sick, how you negotiated with the bank to save the property during the drought, how you never let anyone tell you what you couldn't do. Did she now? I think she admired you in her way, but she resented you too. She could never be what you were, and she knew it. So she decided to take what you had instead. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Karen, admiring me. Karen, resenting me. Karen, loving me and hating me in equal measure. Maybe that was the truth. Maybe all of it was true at once. Human hearts are complicated things. They can hold contradictions without breaking, at least until they can't. She's coming to visit next month. She wants to meet the grandmother she thought she'd lost. We've started building something, Lily and I, something new, not a replacement for what was lost, but something different, something honest. She calls every Sunday evening, tells me about her life in Portland, her job at a nonprofit that helps elderly victims of fraud. It's because of you, she said last week. What happened to you? I wanted to help other people like you. People who've been betrayed by the ones they trusted most. That's a good thing to do with your pain, I said. Turn it into something useful. That's what you did, isn't it? With the recording, with the evidence. You took your pain and turned it into protection. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. If you're listening to this story, I want you to remember something. The people who hurt us most are often the ones we trusted completely. Blood doesn't guarantee love. Family doesn't guarantee safety. I spent 79 years believing that my daughter loved me. I spent a year locked in a back room while she told the world I was losing my mind. I came within days of being cremated alive because I couldn't imagine that my own child would want me dead. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Document everything. Tell someone. Don't stay quiet because you're afraid of making trouble or because you think it's not polite to question the people who claim to love you. I almost died because I was too polite to question my own daughter, because I thought keeping peace was more important than keeping myself safe. I was wrong. Harold used to say a woman who keeps good records can survive anything. He was right. That dictaphone saved my life. Those receipts proved the crime. The evidence I gathered in 6 days undid the scheme they'd planned for months. So keep records, save documents, trust your gut. And when you find yourself in a situation that doesn't feel right, don't wait until you're lying in a back room listening to someone plan your funeral. Act, fight, survive. I'm sitting on my porch as I tell you this story. The sun is setting over the garden, painting everything gold and amber. Pastor Chen stopped by earlier with soup from the church potluck. My granddaughter Lily is flying in next week. The cottage is small, but it's mine. No one can move me to a back room. No one can tell the world I'm dead. I'm 79 years old. I'm alive, and I'm free. Karen thought she was going to inherit everything. The farm money, the insurance payout, the last scraps of her parents' legacy. Instead, she inherited prison. Dale inherited prison. Dr. Price inherited a revoked license and 5 years of his own, and the $400,000 from Harold's insurance policy. The money they were so desperate to steal. It went exactly where Harold intended. To the church that married us, baptized our children, buried our son. To the building fund that will help that church serve the community for generations to come. Harold always said he didn't trust banks, didn't trust lawyers, didn't trust anyone completely, but he trusted one thing, the permanence of a good plan, properly documented. He set up that beneficiary designation 30 years ago, right after Michael's remains came home from Vietnam. He never told Karen. He never told anyone except me. And honestly, I'd forgotten about it until I saw it in that filing cabinet highlighted in yellow by a daughter who hadn't bothered to read page 4. That's the thing about greed. It makes you careless. It makes you assume. It makes you think you already know everything you need to know. So you stop looking. Karen assumed the money was hers. She assumed I was helpless. She assumed no one would believe the crazy old woman with dementia. She assumed wrong. There's a verse in Proverbs that Harold used to quote, "The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in those who tell the truth." Karen built her plans on lies, on forged documents and false diagnoses, and the assumption that her mother would go quietly into whatever grave they dug for her. But truth has a way of surfacing. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need an invitation. It just needs someone brave enough to open the door. I was that someone. I opened the door, and everything Karen had built came crashing down. I want to leave you with one final thought, something I've learned in the 79 years I've walked this earth. In the 50 years I ran a farm. In the 2 years since my husband died. And my daughter decided I was more valuable dead than alive. You are never too old to fight. You are never too weak to protect yourself. You are never too alone to find allies. And you are never, ever obligated to accept abuse from anyone, no matter what blood ties you share. Karen was my daughter. I gave birth to her, raised her, loved her with everything I had. And when she decided to have me killed for money, I put her in prison. That doesn't make me a bad mother. That makes me a survivor. That makes me a woman who finally understood that love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. Subscribe to this channel if you believe grandmothers deserve dignity. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to fight back. And comment below, have you ever had to stand up against someone you loved? Tell me your story. I want to hear it. The sun has set now. The garden is dark. In the morning, I'll be out there again, pulling weeds, checking tomatoes, doing the work that keeps my hands busy and my mind sharp. 80 next birthday. I never thought I'd make it this far. For a while there, I was pretty sure I wouldn't. But here I am, still standing, still fighting, still alive. And no one, not my daughter, not her husband, not any forged document or prepaid cremation, is ever going to take that from me again. Before I tell you what happened in the years that followed, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between love and protection, between peace and survival, between the person you wanted your family to be and the person they actually were? If you have, you know how hard it is. You know the sleepless nights and the second guessing and the terrible, gnawing guilt that comes from standing up for yourself when everyone else thinks you should have just gone along to get along. But you also know something else. You know the relief, the freedom, the quiet pride of knowing that you didn't let someone else's cruelty define the end of your story. I know that pride now. I wear it like armor. 2 years have passed since Karen's conviction. 2 years since I moved into my cottage near the church. 2 years of rebuilding, of healing, of learning to live again. My granddaughter Lily visits every few months. She's helping me write a memoir, she says. Grandma's story needs to be told. I'm not sure about that, but I like having her here, watching her fingers fly across her laptop keyboard, listening to her ask questions about the old days. Pastor Chen still stops by with soup. The church ladies have adopted me as their unofficial grandmother. I help with the youth group sometimes, telling stories about farm life to kids who've never seen a cow in person. The insurance money funded a new fellowship hall. They put a plaque on the wall. The Harold and Edith Morrison, Memorial Community Center. I cried when I saw it. Harold would have hated the attention, but he would have loved knowing his legacy was helping others. And Karen is in prison in Iowa, serving her sentence. She's written me dozens of letters over the years. I've read them all. I've responded to none. Maybe one day I'll forgive her. Maybe one day I'll find the words to bridge the chasm she created. But today is not that day. Today, I'm just grateful to be here, grateful to be alive, grateful for the dictaphone Harold gave me, for the paranoia that turned out to be wisdom, for the instincts I finally learned to trust. Remember, trust your instincts, keep good records, and never, ever let anyone convince you that you're too old, too weak, or too alone to fight for yourself. You're not. I promise. God bless you all.